I had been working at New Horizons for about 5 years. These kids were street kids, kids that had been suspended from school, kids that had a lot of behavioral problems. The kids have just learned a lot of behavior out on the streets that does not serve them well and is not going to take them down a path that will be a very productive path. A lot of kids, like the kids at New Horizons, end up in prison. And we don't want that to happen. It's a lost segment of our population.
Sometimes when the world is a real difficult place, when there aren't adults around to help shape, provide safety, adolescents look to other adolescents. And typically, there's a process by which people tend to settle with friends who have emotional and intellectual development like their own. So, out of that we get dysfunctional groups of young people, gangs.
How many gangs in Durham?
Yeah, so it's a lot. It ain't just the Bloods and the Crips. It's more than that. A lot of my friends, they done got killed and stuff from being in gangs.
Without naming any names, can you tell me about any one of those and exactly what went on and how they died?
Shootings and stuff.
Well,
like drive-by shootings. They been outside of a store or something. They just get another gang rivalry, just come up and shoot.
You say you have more than one friend to die?
Yes, ma'am.
How many have you had?
A lot.
Huh?
More than on my hand.
More than on your hand?
Yeah, I count more than on my hand.
Well-functioning adolescents are happy. They are trying to understand their place in the world. They begin to think of themselves in the future. They are challenging the assumptions that they learned when they were younger. It's a time of wonderful challenges. Unfortunately, it's a time when these challenges overwhelm the ability of a young person to adapt. And very often that's due to early injuries or a lack of developmental experiences that leave the adolescent ill-prepared for the complexities of adolescent life.
Adolescents are probably the most full of life people, aside from a 2-year-old, that we know of. So if you want to be around life, go work with adolescents. Many a day I would come home discouraged, and several times the class just fell completely apart. They'd flash the gang colors where you weren't aware of it, and the class would just disintegrate. So it was very, very hard work, but I loved it.
The time to start thinking about working with adolescents is years before they ever get to be an adolescent. Our culture lays the building stones. We provide for our children a non-obligatory time in their life where they are more or less educated, coerced, forced to sort of identify with the society as a whole. You have to learn how to be a civilized person.
Probably the biggest influence was my parents, and that's the biggest influence probably for anyone, and anything other than that means someone has to step out. If you have a parent missing, someone has to step out and give assistance along the way. institutions in the community, such as the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts at an early age, being able to play Little League Baseball, all of those institutional things that we take for granted, at least during my lifetime and during my early years, are things that are very important to give opportunities, to give activity, to learn teamwork, to learn to work with people, to learn leadership.
What is the pull to join a gang? Can you tell me that? Why do people want to join a gang?
Like when you at home, your family break apart, and you ain't got nobody else to talk to. Nobody else will understand you and stuff like that. Nobody in the house, you better communicate with anybody in your house. But somebody like in the neighborhood, like you got friends and stuff, you think they got your back, you can talk to them anytime you want to. Cause when you around the gang, you think they like, oh yeah, they your homeboys, they gonna have your back and stuff like that.
In many instances, all they need to excel and to thrive is some individual attention or someone to show that concern for them at an individual basis instead of being just a face in the crowd. And that may be the one thing that's needed for them to have that self-value and that self-worth, this necessary self-esteem, so they can make it over that hurdle. You know, we always want to hold up the model of the most successful and the best and the brightest, etc. But let's face it, the majority of our society is not that. The majority of our society is that 90%, not that 10%. And we need everybody to be as successful as possible for all of us to go forward.
Behavior is my number one. Until we find a way to change the mindsets of the young people that we work for and redirect their path, that's very hard for us to even reach the academic piece of it or even help them to understand how important it is, and even on the vocational side, to be prepared to take care of themselves and their family. So behavior, as it relates to these young people, is first and foremost for me, because they've been in a mindset and things have been planted that it's a total different world with this group. And what we're trying to do is find as many innovative ways and creative ways to help them find themselves and find out how to redirect that path that they've been on for so long.
I think some of my passion comes from a very strong belief there might be better ways that we could be teaching our kids. How do we change behavior? How do we change our own behavior? How do I change my behavior? How do they begin to observe and step back from their behavior and say, hey, now what's going on here?
How do we help those people develop the ability to stop, to think, to just reflect? I sometimes think in my work with a teenager, if I can just get them to say, on the one hand this, and on the other hand that I've achieved something. At least they're starting to look at two different sides of the issue.
We just took as many instances as we could and tried to say what is going on in this person's mind and in this person's mind. And the way we did it was through skits and also through current event articles that I handed out from fresh, daily, fresh out of off the press. The skits are just a scaffolding. They're simply a scaffolding thrown together. We're not looking for anybody's talents, but we're trying to get an interaction there that we can put under the microscope. So I tried to break it down and in a very rough fashion. It was just it wasn't really fine-tuned, but I wanted to see if we got together some skits, if they could then begin to analyze what goes on between two people in a skit. A skit we did was with the plexiglass sheet. That was to show that if you step on somebody's toe and they get up in your face, you are trying to have some sort of barrier between you so that you don't just react knee-jerk. The white convenience store clerk does not want to touch the black person's hand, and so lays the change on the counter rather than putting it in the hand of the customer.
Does it do happen in real life sometimes?
Has it ever happened to you?
Yes, it has. The fast food restaurants, it has.
And how'd you react to it?
I mean, I just turned my head, grabbed my money, and turned my head like it never happened.
Okay, how does it make you feel?
I don't know. I mean, it don't make me feel like I'm wanted on this earth.
The mother who holds the baby and feels that the baby has something against her by its crying, rather than knowing that the baby is probably hungry or wet. Every time we met, I would put up on the board MindScreen, and then I would put number 1, reading the minds of others, number 2, reading our own minds. We can look and see what the other person's intentions and ideas are, and we learn to be more self-aware. We learn to fess up to our own ideas and intentions, even if we don't want to share it.
In working with adolescents, let's say in a group, we know that we're going to be working with this fear of getting to be too well known. We have to answer the question of, is this going to feel real or is it going to feel phony? If you get a vote of phony from some teenagers, you've got a lot of work to do to get back into their good graces.
I really went in, I think, more as we're in this thing together, not I'm coming to teach you something. It was more like I'm coming and maybe we can learn some new things together. And they could easily see that I was, I was not Miss Calm all the time. But I think they somehow sensed that my intentions were pretty authentic.
One way of approaching it would be through a program where, after achieving a sense of belonging with the adolescents, after having passed the tests that they have to question whether you're just wanting to manipulate them or control them like most other adults in their lives have, if you just want to criticize them and put them down, which is often their experience, if you can pass those tests and they can begin to tell you a little bit about themselves, you can take that and begin to use it as a way to help them understand that they are doing things, they are acting in ways that are being motivated by feelings. And once you get that idea across, it's not too far to go until you have them understanding that other people are pretty much like them.
What I'm trying to do with reading other people's minds, reading our own minds, is to help all of us slow down and see what's going on. There's a meditation called mindfulness where you simply slow down and engage fully in the present moment and begin to see what's going on. It's like slowing down a film. It's like slowing down a video. We had a little chime and we would ring it, and that would be to stop everything.
I like this little gong thing, kind of remind me of some things, help me clear my mind and all that. So, yeah.
That's a skill in itself, and just be able to say, what's going on up here? Am I angry? Am I, what is it? They call it the observing self, the witnessing self.
If you've obtained this sense that we're more alike than we are dissimilar, then you can move it to a next step. The next step involves thinking out loud with people that you've come to trust about things that worry you, frighten you, threaten you, And there are all kind of threats.
These kids are very challenging and exhausting and very gratifying, because all of a sudden you see that something you're trying to get across, they've got it.
At first I really wasn't interested in the class, but as it went by, I was starting to get interested in it because I learned a lot of stuff I didn't know.
My favorite was that the one that I took, the skit that I personally was involved in, out of the whole class, I raised my hand and involved myself in, was the one when we was in the grocery store and you dropped your purse and you left your purse at the counter, and I came to pick it up, and I thought about taking it, but I really didn't think about it. But I didn't do it. And when I gave it back to you, I read the mind of you and saying that you was gonna be happy.
These kids are our future, and so you can't just ignore them and put them out of sight. We need to deal with them, and we need to know that they have many gifts.
We're dealing with human assets, and we need to bring into fruition as many of our fellow citizens and youth as possible so we can have a better society. And that's the only way we're going to do it. Money is not going to be enough. Just having a few people be able to succeed is not going to be enough. We need to get as many people involved and able to succeed as possible at whatever level they can attain.
They have some wonderful traits, and they begin to come out, and you think one of these kids could be the chef that cooks in the 5-star restaurant that cooks my meal. One of these kids could be the builder that makes my dream home come true. One of these kids could be the doctor that saves my life.
They're still our future, whether we want to acknowledge it and bring them in or not. They're still our future, and that will always be the case, and they will be the future for us, and their children will be their future. So what we do for them will carry on generation after generation, so it's something we must do.